shit.
I've spent the last 6 weeks building a Windows 98 machine, and it's been an adventure. This build has taken a lot longer than I anticipated. I bought the computer from a guy off Kijiji, and it reeked of smoked, and when I got home, it didn't work. At first, it powered on, but it didn't post, and then it just wouldn't power on. So I did a quick check of the power supply and all the motherboard's capacitors just to be sure. Then I removed all the components, the CPU, the RAM, the drives. I cleaned all the edge connectors on the RAM and the CPU. Oh, I should mention, the CPU is a slot 1. Once I reinstalled all the parts, it powered up without issue. The computer came with a hard drive, but it wasn't showing the proper size. It's a 20 gig drive, but it only reported as 8. Now, I'm aware of BIOS limitations when it comes to drives, so I checked the manual for any mention, but I didn't find any. So I checked ASUS's website for an updated BIOS, and it did mention the removal of the size limit for the latest BIOS. Once I updated the BIOS, the drive still reported as 8 gig, so I just moved on to another drive that I had. I was able to get an 80 gig hard drive working without issue. Another issue I ran into while building this computer was the graphics card. So I chose an Nvidia GeForce 2 MX400, mostly because of the price, and it was everywhere. The one I had, sadly, had a bad capacitor and wouldn't go into 3D mode, while 2D worked just fine. I was able to find a replacement MX400 for $2 at a thrift store though. I was going to add a network card to the computer, to transfer files and play games with my 486, but after searching for the proper drivers for the card I had, I gave up. Installing Windows 98 wasn't too bad. One issue I had though was with F-Disk. So the version included with the Windows 98 2nd edition CD kept verifying disk integrity, just in an endless loop. So I ended up using FreeDOS to partition and format the hard drive to FAT32. After that, Windows 98 installed perfectly. Once Windows was installed, I needed some drivers. Well, actually, I only needed one driver, the graphics card. So without the NIC, I couldn't just transfer files, and the drivers were nearly about 100 gigs or so floppy was out of the question. CD, that's just too annoying to burn a disk and then bring it over and then burn a disk again if I needed something else. So thankfully this computer has 2 USB ports on the motherboard. Now Windows 98 doesn't have the greatest USB support, especially for USB mass storage. So back then you needed drivers for your specific USB drive. Thankfully somebody created a generic USB mass storage driver for Windows 98, and it works perfectly. Once they were installed, installing the Nvidia drivers was pretty easy. The Sound Blaster Vibra 16 card that's in here is using the default Windows drivers, so I'll leave that for now. So with all the required drivers installed and DirectX updated, it was time to get onto some games. So Doom 95 worked great, no issues there. Interstate 76, I don't know what's going on here, but it blue screens every time I try to install it. So I'll have to come back to this one. I tried a few things, but nothing was working. Fallout installed and works perfectly. Kind of excited for this one. Well, the final specs for this machine are Intel Celeron 366, 512 megabytes of PC100 RAM, an 80 gigabyte hard drive, 40 times CD-ROM, which came out of the 486, an Nvidia GeForce 2 MX400, and the Sound Blaster Vibra 16C. In the future, some things that I like to do with this computer are maybe upgrade the CPU to a Pentium 2 or a Pentium 3. I'd like to get a better sound card. The FM synthesis on the Vibra 16 is just awful. But it does have a header for an add-on Wave Blaster, so I might look at that. And finally, I might actually install the unofficial service pack for Windows 98. That about does it for this build. I'll continue to work on this computer, install a lot more games, and I'll probably make more videos about this too.